I remember the day she told me she was pregnant as if it were etched in my mind. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on her face, and for a moment, I felt like the luckiest man alive. We had been trying for a baby, and now, it seemed our dreams were finally coming true. I could hardly contain my excitement as I wrapped my arms around her, lifting her off the ground in a spontaneous embrace. Her laughter filled the room, a sound so pure and joyful that it echoed in my heart. We spent the next few days in a blissful haze, planning for the future. I could already envision the nursery, painted in soft pastels, filled with toys and books. I imagined the sound of tiny feet pattering across the hardwood floors, the smell of baby powder wafting through the air, and the late-night feedings that would bond us even closer. I was ready to be a father, to nurture and protect this new life that was growing inside her. But as the days turned into weeks, a nagging feeling began to creep in. Something didn't add up. The way she avoided certain questions, the late-night phone calls, and the sudden need for privacy, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. I brushed it off at first, attributing my unease to the stress of impending fatherhood. After all, she was my wife, the woman I loved more than anything. Surely, I was just being paranoid. Yet, the more I tried to ignore it, the more pronounced the signs became. I noticed her phone buzzing incessantly, her eyes darting away whenever I entered the room. There were moments when she would smile at me, but it felt forced, as if she were trying to convince herself that everything was fine. I wanted to believe her, to trust her completely, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing, twisting and turning in my mind like a vine choking a tree. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I overheard her on the phone in the other room. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but I could catch snippets of the conversation. "I can't, not now, it's too risky." My heart raced as I strained to hear more, but she ended the call abruptly, and I could hear her footsteps approaching. I quickly turned my attention to the stove, pretending to be engrossed in the simmering sauce, but my mind was racing. Who was she talking to? What was so risky? That night, as we lay in bed, I turned to her, my heart heavy with unspoken questions. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked at me, her eyes wide, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of fear cross her face. "Of course, I am," she replied, her voice steady but lacking the warmth I craved. "Just tired, I guess." I wanted to press further, to dig deeper into the shadows that seemed to loom over us, but I held back. I didn't want to ruin the joy of our impending parenthood with my insecurities. Instead, I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, hoping that the warmth of my embrace would chase away the chill of doubt that had settled in my heart. As I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The excitement I had felt just days before was now tinged with anxiety. I wanted to believe in the fairy tale we had created together, but the cracks were beginning to show, and I was terrified of what lay beneath the surface. Little did I know, the truth was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to shatter the illusion of our perfect life. As the weeks passed, the initial joy of impending fatherhood began to morph into a heavy cloud of suspicion. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every glance, every moment that felt off. The excitement I had felt when she first shared the news of her pregnancy was now overshadowed by a gnawing anxiety that refused to let go. I tried to convince myself that I was being irrational, that my fears were unfounded, but the more I tried to suppress them, the louder they became. One afternoon, I decided to surprise her with a small gift, a baby onesie with a cute little bear on it. I thought it would bring a smile to her face, a reminder of the joy we were supposed to be sharing. But when I handed it to her, her reaction was not what I had hoped for. She took the onesie, her fingers brushing over the soft fabric, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Instead, she looked away, her expression clouded with something I couldn't quite place. Was it guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's adorable." But the way she clutched it to her chest, as if it were a lifeline, sent a shiver down my spine. I wanted to ask her what was wrong, to dig deeper into the emotions swirling around us, but I hesitated. I didn't want to push her away, to make her feel cornered. So, I smiled and tried to brush it off, but the unease lingered like a shadow. That evening, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The cool air felt refreshing against my skin, but my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I replayed the moments of the past few weeks, searching for clues, for anything that could explain the distance that had grown between us. I thought about the phone calls, the late nights, the way she seemed to be living in a world that I wasn't a part of. As I walked, I passed by a small cafe where we used to spend lazy Sunday mornings, sipping coffee and dreaming about our future. I stopped for a moment, peering through the window, and my heart sank. There she was, sitting at a table with a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing, leaning in close, their body language intimate in a way that made my stomach churn. I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me, leaving me suspended in disbelief. I stood frozen, watching them, my heart racing as 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Who was he? Why was she with him? The questions spiraled, each one more painful than the last. I wanted to storm inside, to confront her, to demand answers, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Instead, I turned away, my heart heavy with betrayal. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over again. I could feel the tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had to be strong. I had to confront her, to find out the truth. But how could I do that without sounding like a jealous fool? The next morning, I decided to approach the subject delicately. Over breakfast, I tried to keep the conversation light, but my mind was racing. I needed to know if she had been unfaithful, but I didn't want to accuse her outright. Instead, I asked her about her day, about the people she had been spending time with. "Oh, just some friends from work," she replied, her eyes darting away as she took a sip of her coffee. "You know how it is." I nodded, but the unease in my gut only grew. I wanted to press further, to ask about the man I had seen her with, but I held back. I didn't want to scare her off or make her feel trapped. Instead, I forced a smile and tried to act as if everything was normal, but inside, I was a storm of emotions, fear, anger, confusion. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between us became palpable. I could feel the distance growing, a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. I wanted to reach out, to pull her back into my arms, but every time I tried, I was met with a wall of silence. The laughter that once filled our home was replaced with an uncomfortable quiet, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. I knew I had to confront her, to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. But the thought of what I might discover terrified me. What if my suspicions were true? What if the woman I loved had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way? As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent vow to myself. I would find out the truth, no matter the cost. I would uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface, even if it meant shattering the fragile illusion of happiness we had built together. The days dragged on, each one heavier than the last, and the weight of my suspicions felt like a leaden anchor pulling me deeper into despair. I could no longer ignore the signs, the whispers of doubt that echoed in my mind. I had to confront her. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it terrified me. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home with a resolve that felt both empowering and frightening. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that felt oppressive, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I found her in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book, her brow furrowed in concentration. For a moment, I hesitated, watching her, trying to memorize the way the light danced across her features, the way her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, and yet I knew that beneath that calm exterior lay a storm of secrets. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. She looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes, and nodded slowly. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've been feeling off lately. Like something's not right between us." I watched her closely, searching for any sign of guilt, but her expression remained neutral. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone casual, but I could sense the tension in her body. "I don't know." It's just, you've been distant. You're always on your phone, and you seem to be hiding things from me. I paused, gauging her reaction. Is there something you want to tell me? Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of fear cross her face. I'm just busy with work and the pregnancy. It's a lot to handle, she replied, her voice defensive. Busy with work? I pressed, my frustration bubbling to the surface. Or busy with someone else? The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted my tone. She stiffened, her gaze hardening. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I just want to know the truth. Are you seeing someone else? The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the air thickening between us, charged with unspoken words and emotions. She looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. Why would you think that? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I saw you with a man at the cafe, I blurted out, my heart racing. You looked close. Her expression shifted, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of panic. That was just a friend from work, she said quickly, but the way she avoided my gaze told me everything I needed to know. Just a friend? I echoed, my voice rising. You expect me to believe that? You've been acting strange for weeks, and now I find you with someone else? It doesn't add up. She stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. You're being ridiculous. I can't believe you would accuse me of cheating. Accuse you? I shot back, my frustration boiling over. I'm not accusing you, I'm trying to understand what's happening. I love you, and I want to trust you, but you're making it impossible. Her eyes flashed with hurt, and for a moment, I felt a pang of regret. I didn't want to hurt her, I just wanted the truth. But the truth felt like a knife, sharp and unforgiving, and I was terrified of what it might reveal. I can't do this right now, she said, her voice trembling. I need some space. Space? I repeated, incredulous. You think that's going to solve anything? We need to talk about this. But she turned away, walking toward the bedroom, and I felt a sense of helplessness wash over me. I wanted to follow her, to plead with her to stay, but I knew that pushing her would only drive her further away. Instead, I sank onto the couch, my heart heavy with despair. The silence in the house was suffocating, and I felt like I was drowning in my own thoughts. I replayed our conversation over and over, searching for clues, for anything that could explain her behavior. I felt like a detective in a twisted mystery, piecing together fragments of evidence that pointed to a truth I wasn't ready to face. As the night wore on, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, that the woman I loved was slipping through my fingers like sand. I wanted to believe in her, to trust her completely, but the doubt gnawed at me, relentless and unforgiving. I knew I had to confront her again, to dig deeper into the shadows that loomed over us. But the thought of what I might discover terrified me. What if my suspicions were true? What if the woman I loved had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way? As I closed my eyes, I made a silent vow to myself. I would find out the truth, no matter the cost. I would uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface, even if it meant shattering the fragile illusion of happiness we had built together. The days that followed our confrontation were a blur of tension and uncertainty. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, balancing between hope and despair. Each time I saw her, I searched her face for answers, for any sign that would confirm my worst fears or dispel them entirely. But she wore a mask of calm, and I was left grappling with my own spiraling thoughts. One evening, after another day of silence and avoidance, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't continue living in this limbo, caught between love and betrayal. I needed to know the truth, and I was willing to do whatever it took to uncover it. I started by going through her things. It felt wrong, like I was invading her privacy, but desperation clouded my judgment. I rummaged through her purse, her drawers, and even her phone, searching for any evidence that would confirm my suspicions. Each moment felt like a betrayal in itself, but I was driven by a need for clarity. It was late at night when I finally found something, a series of text messages on her phone that made my heart drop. They were from the same number, a name I didn't recognize, and the messages were flirtatious, filled with inside jokes and intimate language that made my stomach churn. My hands trembled as I read through them, each word cutting deeper than the last. "Can't wait to see you again," one message read. "You make me feel alive." I felt sick. The world around me blurred as I processed the reality of what I was reading. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted, was having an affair. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, knocking the breath from my lungs. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there, but I held back. I needed to gather my thoughts, to formulate a plan before I confronted her again. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, but beneath it all was a simmering rage that threatened to boil over. I had given her everything, and in return, she had shattered my trust. I felt like a fool, a man who had built his life on a foundation of lies. The next day, I decided to confront her again, but this time, I would be armed with the truth. I needed her to see the evidence, to understand the depth of her betrayal. I waited until evening, when the house was quiet, and I could feel the tension in the air like a taut string ready to snap. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of anger. She looked up from her book, her expression wary, but she nodded. "Sure, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "I found something," I said, pulling out my phone and showing her the messages. "I found these on your phone." Her face paled as she read the words, and I could see the color drain from her cheeks. I can explain," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Explain?" I echoed, my voice rising. "What is there to explain? You're having an affair. How could you do this to me?" "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her eyes welling with tears. "It was a mistake. I was feeling lost, and I didn't know how to talk to you about it." "Lost?" I repeated, incredulous. "You think that justifies betraying me? You think that's an excuse?" "I never wanted to hurt you," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't go this far. But it did, and I'm so sorry." The tears streamed down her face, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly overshadowed by the anger that surged within me. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, my voice cold. "You've shattered everything we built together. How can I ever trust you again?" "I'll do anything to make it right," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I love you, and I want to fix this." "Love?" I scoffed, my heart aching with betrayal. "How can you say you love me when you've been with someone else? You've destroyed our marriage." "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know I messed up, but please, just give me a chance to explain." I was scared, and I didn't know how to talk to you about what I was feeling. I shook my head, my heart heavy with the weight of her words. "You should have talked to me. We could have worked through it together. But instead, you chose to betray me." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the air thickening between us, charged with unspoken words and emotions. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I held back. Instead, I turned away, my heart breaking as I realized that the woman I had loved was now a stranger. "I need time," I said finally, my voice low. "I can't do this right now." As I walked away, I felt a sense of emptiness wash over me. I had uncovered the truth, but it felt like a hollow victory. The love I had once cherished was now tainted by betrayal, and I was left grappling with the aftermath of her choices. I knew I had to make a decision about our future, but the thought of what lay ahead filled me with dread. I had to confront the reality of our shattered marriage, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for the consequences. The days that followed the confrontation felt like a blur, a haze of confusion and heartbreak. I moved through life like a ghost, haunted by the memories of what once was and the painful reality of what had become. Each moment was a reminder of the love I had lost, and the weight of betrayal pressed heavily on my chest. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, each wave crashing over me, threatening to pull me under. I spent hours wandering through the city, trying to escape the suffocating silence of our home. I found solace in the familiar streets, the places we had once visited together, but now they felt tainted, reminders of a love that had crumbled. I would sit in cafes, nursing a cup of coffee, watching couples laugh and share intimate moments, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. How could they be so carefree when my world had been turned upside down? In the midst of my turmoil, I sought refuge in my friends. I reached out to them, sharing my pain, my confusion, and the betrayal that had shattered my heart. They listened, offering support and understanding, but I could see the pity in their eyes. I didn't want their sympathy, I wanted answers, clarity, and a way to heal. One evening, I met up with my best friend, Mark, at a bar. He had been my confidant through thick and thin, and I knew he would tell me the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As we sat in a dimly lit corner, nursing our drinks, I poured out my heart to him. "I don't know what to do, Mark," I admitted, my voice heavy with emotion. "I feel so lost. I thought we had something special, something unbreakable, and now it feels like it was all a lie." Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. "You need to take care of yourself first, man. You can't fix this until you figure out what you want. Do you still love her?" The question hung in the air, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Part of me still loves her, but I can't shake the feeling of betrayal. How can I trust her again?" "Trust is everything in a relationship," he said, his voice firm. "If you can't trust her, then what's the point? You deserve someone who values you, who respects you." His words resonated with me, and I felt a flicker of clarity amidst the chaos. I realized that I had been so focused on trying to salvage our marriage that I hadn't considered my own needs, my own worth. I had to prioritize my healing, my happiness, before I could even think about what the future held for us. That night, I made a decision. I would take time for myself, to reflect on what I truly wanted. I needed to step back from the chaos and allow myself to grieve the loss of the relationship I had once cherished. I would focus on healing, on rediscovering who I was outside of our marriage. In the weeks that followed, I began to explore new hobbies, reconnecting with parts of myself that had been overshadowed by my relationship. I took up running, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement, the rush of endorphins that came with each mile. I started journaling, pouring my thoughts and feelings onto the pages, allowing myself to process the whirlwind of emotions that had consumed me. I also sought therapy, recognizing that I needed professional guidance to navigate the complexities of my feelings. My therapist helped me unpack the layers of betrayal, anger, and sadness, guiding me toward a place of understanding and acceptance. I learned that healing was not linear, it was a journey filled with ups and downs, moments of clarity interspersed with setbacks. As I began to heal, I found myself reflecting on the lessons I had learned from this painful experience. I realized that love was not enough to sustain a relationship. Trust, respect, and open communication were equally vital. I had to be honest with myself about my needs and boundaries, and I had to be willing to walk away if those needs were not being met. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had come a long way from the heartbroken man who had stumbled through the days in a fog of despair. I was beginning to reclaim my life, to rediscover my passions and dreams. But even as I found solace in my own journey, the question of my marriage loomed large. I knew I would have to confront my wife again, to discuss the future of our relationship. I had taken the time to heal, but I also needed to decide if I could ever trust her again. As I closed my journal that night, I made a silent vow to myself. I would approach the conversation with honesty and clarity, ready to face whatever truth lay ahead. I had learned to prioritize my own well-being, and I was determined to move forward, whether that meant rebuilding our marriage or finding the strength to let go. The day had finally come for me to confront my wife again. I had spent countless hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing the words I wanted to say, the questions I needed to ask. I felt a mix of anxiety and determination as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my shirt and taking a deep breath. I was ready to face the truth, whatever it might be. As I walked into the living room, I found her sitting on the couch, her expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could feel the tension crackling between us. I had spent weeks processing my emotions, and now it was time to share my thoughts with her. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady but soft. She nodded, her eyes searching mine for answers. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," I began, taking a seat across from her. "About us, about what happened, and about what I need moving forward." She looked down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I never wanted to betray your trust. I was lost, and I made a terrible mistake." "I appreciate your apology," I replied, trying to keep my emotions in check. "But I need to be honest with you. I've spent the last few weeks focusing on myself, on healing, and I've realized that trust is something that can't be easily rebuilt. It's going to take time, and I'm not sure if I can ever fully trust you again." Her eyes filled with tears, and I felt a pang of sympathy. "I understand," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I have to earn your trust back, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I love you, and I want to fix this." "I want to believe that," I said, my heart aching. "But love isn't enough. I need to see real change, real commitment from you. I need to know that you're willing to put in the effort to rebuild what we had." "I will," she insisted, her voice firm. "I'll go to therapy, I'll do whatever it takes to show you that I'm serious about making this work. I don't want to lose you." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to walk away, to cut my losses and move on. But another part of me still held on to the love we had shared, the dreams we had built together. I knew that if we were going to move forward, it would require both of us to be fully committed to the process. "I'm willing to give us a chance," I said finally, my voice steady. "But it's going to take time, and I need you to understand that. I can't just forget what happened. We'll need to communicate openly, honestly, and work through this together." She nodded, relief washing over her face. "I promise I'll do everything I can to make this right. I love you, and I want to fight for us." As we talked, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. It wouldn't be easy, and I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was willing to try. We both had to put in the effort to rebuild our relationship, to create a new foundation built on trust and understanding. In the weeks that followed, we began to navigate the rocky terrain of our renewed relationship. We attended couples therapy together, where we learned to communicate more effectively, to express our feelings without fear of judgment. It was a slow process, filled with moments of vulnerability and discomfort, but I could feel the walls between us starting to crumble. We also made a conscious effort to reconnect on a deeper level. We spent time together, rediscovering the things we loved about each other. We went on walks, shared meals, and even revisited the places that had once held special meaning for us. Each moment felt like a step toward healing, a chance to rebuild the bond that had been fractured. But even as we worked through our issues, I knew that the journey was far from over. Trust would take time to rebuild, and there would be moments of doubt and insecurity. I had to remind myself that healing was not linear, it was a process filled with ups and downs. One evening, as we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The colors painted the sky in vibrant hues, a reminder that beauty could emerge from even the darkest moments. I turned to her, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. "I'm glad we're doing this," I said, my voice soft. "I know it's going to be a long road, but I believe we can get through it together." She smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for giving me another chance. I won't take it for granted." As we sat together, I realized that while the scars of betrayal would always remain, they didn't have to define us. We had the power to create a new narrative, one built on honesty, trust, and love. In that moment, I understood that healing was not just about moving past the pain, it was about embracing the journey, learning from the experience, and growing together. I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that we were stronger together than apart. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over us, I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. We had a long way to go, but for the first time in a while, I believed that we could find our way back to each other.